when my father died in 1975, and we were well on our way in making the legal clinic an institution, I decided that I really didn't want to be an entrepreneur only at that time. I wanted to really teach. It was quite interesting. Steve Myers was the son of two professors, and he wanted nothing more than to be a merchant. I was the son of a merchant and wanted nothing more than to be a professor. But that's, I guess, what makes good partners. And they both asked me if I wanted to have leave, and I said no. I said I wanted to have a different life. Turns out, I'll tell you about the different life in a moment. Len Jacoby and I are still very good friends. His office is actually right next to mine in Los Angeles. That's now almost 40 years. Steve Myers unfortunately died in a one-car accident about 10 years ago. About 2 years before his death, he and Len, unfortunately as two brothers, had a major public dissolution, public fight, and it was very disturbing to me. And I wrote a letter to the Daily Journal in Los Angeles, which is a huge legal newspaper, asking them to mediate, and they did, and they were able to settle their matter privately. Now I can't tell you my letter got them to mediate, but they did mediate, and I was actually very shaken by Steve's death. He was the first of my closest friends to die. I was spared all of the young people dying during the war. It seemed that the educated and those who had means didn't go in great numbers to that war. It was a war for poorer people and people of color. Something else very good happened out of the Jacoby and Myers fight that changed legal access in this country and also had an impact on me. There was a man who was a professor at University of Southern California who called us up. Now remember, some of our professors weren't as supportive. He was called the father of preventive law. His name was Lewis M. Brown, and he wrote about at least 12 books and well over 150 articles during his life. He had a motto. He didn't think that people should be in trouble if they didn't have to be. And he said, I don't know you boys, but I think no one should stop you from doing what you're doing. All you're doing is making law accessible to the middle class. So he testified for us. He was our most prestigious witness. And from that, I got a friend who became a mentor for the rest of his life until 1996. So from 72 to 96, he was, in many ways, my father, my teacher. We would travel together. He would inspire me in thinking about legal access and preventive law. Today in my office, I have a learning center called a client library. It's called the Lewis M. Brown Client Library. If you look at the ABA, there's a Lewis M. Brown Legal Access Award. There's a Lewis M. Brown Conflict Prevention Award of the LA County Bar. And there's a Lewis M. Brown International Client Counseling Competition. I made a promise to Lou that I would try to spread his work and his ideas. He wasn't interested in his name, but I thought that went along with it. And of all the things that I've done, having his work and in those institutions and that I was able to do with the various committee work that I did is probably the most proud that I am. And I'm still involved in all of those institutions. After I left Jacoby and Myers, I went to to teach, but I wouldn't do it the easy way. I didn't go to Los Angeles. I went to the employment conference at ALS, which was in Chicago. And I don't know if you're aware of what that's like. Basically, you buy a plane ticket, you go to a hotel, you throw in your resume, and you hope people invite you up to their suite to interview you. And I had a number of interviews, but the warmest and the nicest interview of all came from the Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. I had to look on the map to make sure I knew where Macon was. And they were the best recruiters of any law school that I dealt with. I had some other opportunities, but they were welcoming, and right from Chicago they said, "You're halfway here, how about coming next week?" So I did. And I remember meeting a group of dedicated young, it seemed like most of the members had graduated in my class, so we were all about 30 at the time. And we met, and I bargained for two things. I wanted to be the head of the clinical education program. They never had a clinical education. Sold. And the second is I wanted to be the faculty advisor for the Black Law Student Association. Yes, it was called BALSA at the time. They were delighted to give that to me. I didn't have to bargain too hard. But I did something else, and I made this, it was very, very interesting. I had taken a bit of a pay cut to go there. I believe it was $19,000 they were offering me. And they gave me BALSA, and they gave me the clinical education and classes I wanted. I said yes. One of the classes I wanted was negotiation. I learned later they had $23,000 on the table ready to give me. I never asked for it. I'm surprised they offered me the job, because if in fact I was such a good negotiator, how could I let $4,000 go out the door? But I did, and we had a good laugh about that for years to come. And it was a wonderful time that I had there, and I actually went all over the South in recruiting African American law students for Mercer. And there were two when I got there, and I think there were something like 28 when I left. And to me, it was a very, I was their mentor. Macon, Georgia had a population of about 55% African American, and they had 1% lawyers. And so to me, having that diversity was really key at that time. And I'm actually still in contact with some of those young people that I had met where I recruited, and then they came to Mercer. And it was a very satisfying time. I stayed in touch with Lou Brown, and he had started something called the Client Counseling Competition. And the Client Counseling Competition was to have client-centered lawyering. Okay. And that was a simulation of a client interview. And he had been so successful in starting it himself, he gave it to the ABA with some money to get it started then. And I did the regional, Southeast Regional in 1977. I remember that now. And we had people from all over the South. Also, that was the first time I had heard about mediation. I was teaching client counseling and trial practice and criminal law and negotiation, and I heard about this thing called mediation, and it seemed to be very exciting. And the closest that I realized of that skill level that I knew I think I would have enjoyed was when I went to become a NIDA teacher. That's the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. And they teach you there how to critique. And from what I've been reading, it was very important to debrief and critique mediation students and people learning there. But I hadn't had any training.